This is a short video, well, short I guess is relative, for my CIS 1605 course. This is covering the 3.2.2.3 lab that is found in the getting started with a single board computer Raspberry Pi. So this is going to be typically week 5 of the course. And the lab that we're looking at doing today is 3223, setting up the PL app with the Raspberry Pi. There is an attachment to this that is the PDF of the instructions. I am going to walk you through how we would normally set this up in class, so that, and you can follow along with the video. You can also read the instructions, but the video is going to point out some things that you're going to be want to be aware of. So the first thing you are going to need to do is log into the Cisco Netacad and go ahead and open our course. Right, so I'll set that aside for a second. The second thing you'll need to do is grab your Raspberry. I'm using a Raspberry Pi 4 today. It doesn't matter which Raspberry you use, 2, 3, or 4. There's one point where you have to choose the proper operating system, so that's the only thing that you need to be aware of for that. You'll need an Ethernet cable, right? So I like to use the Ethernet for this. So just right, in your house, normally you're going to have a router that was provided, say, by CenturyLink or Comcast or something along those lines, that has a switch on it. So I want you to plug in your Raspberry Pi to the switch. It doesn't need to be near you. So if the switch is on the other side of the house, that's fine. Just as long as you have a power plug that you can plug the Raspberry Pi into, you'll be all right. So plug in an Ethernet cable, plug it into your switch or your router. We will talk about the wireless. You can set this up wirelessly. However, that tends to be a little touchy, and to avoid issues, I really like using this. So as long as this network that you're going to plug into is the same network that your computer that you're currently using, as long as they're on the same network, you'll be all right. So you need a Raspberry Pi, Ethernet cable, power cord. You'll also need a fresh SD card, right? So I actually left it in the case here to emphasize the point that you want to do this on a brand new SD card, not one that you've removed from your Raspberry that has your current OS on it, because you will overwrite that OS. The very first thing that happens with this SD card, once we get it plugged into the computer, is a format. Okay, so if you take your Raspberry Pi OS out of your Raspberry and you plug it in to do this assignment, you will overwrite your other SD card, and you will have to go back and rebuild that SD card at a later date. Okay, new, right, or not used, not currently has an OS on it from the Raspberry. And then you need your SD card reader. So gather up those things: SD card reader, SD card, your Raspberry, Ethernet cable, power cable. Make sure you have those things available for us to work on this experiment today. And make sure that you are logged into Netacad. We will need to pull some data from Netacad. All right. So the easiest way to go find this data, we can click on Chapter 3, right, which is the chapter that we're working on. And then we can, click the arrows to get to the place where we want to be. Or you can hit this little X in the top right here to get rid of that. And click on Course Index. Click on Lab Index, right, because we're about to do a lab, so we don't need to see all the reading and all the packet tracers and all that other silly stuff. I scrolled, right, so I'm just using a scroll button down to 3223, setting up the PL app with the Raspberry Pi. This is the lab that we're going to do today. All right. So if you've gathered up your stuff, right, you will need to do a couple things now. So first thing we're going to need is an image, right, the image from Cisco to put onto this SD card. The second thing we need to do is we need to fire up the app launcher, or we need to download and install the launcher, right, which is going to be, it serves two purposes, right? It serves the purpose of setting up your SD card, just like the or similar to the Raspberry Pi imager. And once you have it set up, it is the interface that we'll use to connect to our Raspberry Pi. Okay, so one of the things that's different about this, and we'll look at the setup, the lab piece here in a second, so that you can see what I'm talking about. All right. What we need to do real quick though, we need to click on this PLApp image. You need to get the latest image. This is going to take us to an IoT large files page. We are dealing with the IoT connecting things course, and if you have a Raspberry Pi 4 like I do, you're going to want this image here. So I'm on this line here. I'm going to click on that to get the image, get the download started. The second thing you need to do, or if you don't have a Raspberry Pi 4, if you're using a 3, 3B Plus, a 2, 2B Plus, whatever, if you're using any of those, grab this first one. All right? So you're going to download those. The other thing you need is a launcher. If you're on a Mac, grab the DMG here, and if you're on a PC, grab the EXE. So I'm going to click on that. So I've got my image for the Raspberry Pi 4, and I've got the launcher coming down onto my computer. Okay, I'm going to click back over here to this, and I want to look at this lab. While we're downloading over here, I'm going to look at the lab real quick. Okay. So when I wish, yeah, they have a picture here. So this is kind of, the reason I brought this lab up is so you can see this. You, as the end user, you're going to sit at your computer, right? You're never going to connect, you're not going to connect a monitor or anything to the Raspberry Pi. You literally are going to connect an Ethernet cable and power. That is it, okay? The PLApp launcher, once we've installed the PLApp OS onto the Raspberry Pi and plugged it into our network, the launcher will see the OS, and then we can connect to it, and it opens up a browser. And basically what's going on is Cisco installed, or in this image installs Jupyter notebooks onto the Raspberry Pi and turns the Raspberry Pi into a web server. So I'm not gonna plug it into a monitor. I don't need to plug it into a monitor. I don't need to plug it into keyboard or mouse. I don't need to do anything like that. I just need power and an Ethernet cable, and I will do everything else from my PC. Okay, from my PC, I'll do everything else. I'll connect to it. I'll do the programming from my PC. Right, it sends it over there and that kind of thing. So I just want you to see that so you're aware of it. All right, so the PLApp launcher, the EXE here, I'm going to run that. I've already run it on my computer. I think I rerun it about every time I do this exercise. But it's just going to install the latest and greatest PLApp. Okay. This one's pretty quick. Right, so finished. I'm going to go ahead and launch it. Right, so there's a setup new device tab and an available devices tab. You can see I do this all the time. But set up new devices. I'm going to leave it on that page. I'm going to scoot this off to the side screen until we get this next piece done. Okay, now you can see my zip file is finished downloading. I'm going to click on the arrow and show in folder. Okay. So here's my download folder. This is today's stuff, but right here. And one thing I do want to point out, if you look right there, there's a little period, right? And there's a period there. And this has been my experience, maybe it's different on your machine, but when I try to unzip this file, Windows thinks that 0_PLApp, that it thinks that all of this is the extension, so it doesn't know what to do with it. So the way that I've got around that is I just click on that enough to get it to be able to rename it, and I remove the zero from, or the period, sorry, remove the period from the name. Okay, click outside of that anywhere, and now I can right mouse click and I can use 7-zip to extract the files. And I'm going to extract them right into this local drive. This is the versions I did earlier. I don't need these. Move that out of the way. On the PLApp, we need to plug in an SD card, right? So we're going to grab our trusty SD card. I'm going to take the SD card, plug it into the SD card reader, and then on my PL app here, I'm going to click refresh, and it should give me the E drive, right? So that's nice. We're waiting for this. Like, this is just kind of real time. I want you to see the whole process from start to finish. Okay. While this is going, we can talk about this, how this setup is going to go. The very number one, insert the SD card reader into USB port and select it from the drop-down menu. So if you click refresh, it should show it. Now, I will warn you, right? I don't have anything else plugged into my computer. However, in the past, I don't know if it was PL app or if it was Pi Imager or if it was one of the other, whatever imaging file I was using. I had left my external hard drive plugged in, and it had all of my data on it. All of my stored data that we shared on the network was on that extra USB connected hard drive. And with one of these programs, I formatted it as part of this process, and I wiped out all that data in a matter of seconds. Okay, so be aware of that. I want you to make sure that whatever you choose here, 100% that it is the SD card that you intend it to be. So if you have other stuff plugged in that has data capabilities, you may want to unplug those for this process in order to avoid having issues. All right? So that's the first piece. The second piece, the image, once this is done, we will navigate to this folder and we will choose the image. You can, to connect it wirelessly, I prefer, that's why I talked about that Ethernet cable, I prefer the wired, so I don't need to worry about this. Now, if you're going to try to connect it to your wireless, right, you need to, this is device name. I'm thinking wireless already. Device name, let's call this, I'll use my initials, and this is Spring 22, and this is the IoT class. Okay, so I'm good with that. Password, I am going to use the default password, mainly because it shows on the screen here, right? So, and then if I wanted to use my wireless network, I would have to type in the name exactly as it appears, right? So in this case, it's capital P, little I3 dash A, capital P. Right? As my temporary, this is actually a Raspberry Pi based wireless access point. So this is an access point built on a Raspberry Pi. If you put in the SSID and the password, it will write a configuration and allows your computer to connect to your wireless network. Okay, you can try that. I will tell you that it's a little iffy. Okay, and that's always been a concern. It's a little iffy. It may take you 2 or 3 times to get it quite right. Remember that this is a Linux machine, so you may have to go look at how your network is set up as far as the name is concerned, because I've seen even the uppercase and lowercase matter for it to connect, right? So if you named your network my Wi-Fi network and it's a capital M and everything else is lowercase, then it has to match that in order for it to work. So just be aware of that. If you're following along with what I've asked, right, and you've got it connected to a wire to your network, then you won't need to worry about the wireless config down here. Okay, so wireless config doesn't need it. Now, I think you saw that my extraction finished. Here is my folder with the chestnut image in it. Okay, so that's the image that I want to grab. So I'm going to click on Browse. Maybe. Good time to break again. Not sure why it's taking its own sweet time here on the browser. There we go. Weird. I don't think I have anything. Yeah, I don't have anything extra running. So that says chestnut image document. So this is an older one. See, this is an older one. So downloads. Go to downloads. So you're going to navigate to your folder that you extracted, and you're going to find this chestnut.img. Right? So that's going to be the file that I want. So I'm putting this on. I'm putting the chestnut image on my E drive. I'm naming the computer KAB-SPR-22-IoT, and I just use the default password. Okay. So I'm going to click Write Disk Image right down here. Once you have all your configs the way you want them, just hit Write Disk Image. Hey, we're about to do this. We're going to erase everything, right? Reformat it. You can see the progress down here in the bottom corner. Okay. And it usually takes from, I don't know, sometimes as quick as 3 or 4 minutes, depending on how quick your USB is and how fast your hard drives are. To maybe 5 to 8 minutes, maybe, right? Maybe 10 minutes at the most. So once you get started, you're welcome to kind of step away, take care of business. Give yourself maybe 10 minutes at the most, right? And then head back to the computer. We'll let that roll for a second. %. %. We're almost there. I'm not going to cut this part out because most likely you're following along, right? So it doesn't do any good if I'm done in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then you have to wait 2 or 3 minutes. So I just wanted to leave this running so you can see what's happening. I will tell you, I expect an error to pop at the very end of this installation, right? And it usually throws people if they don't know about it. And if you don't know about it, then you think something's wrong and you start over, and then you waste another 10 minutes, right? So I don't want you to waste any minutes. I want you to just go follow this process with me. Once we get to that point, we'll walk through how to correct the problem. All right, we'll correct the problem at that point. I'm at 89%, it looks like, so I'm just about done. That was actually pretty quick. Probably looking at maybe 5 minutes. Right, so this is doing the same thing the Pi Imager did for the Raspberry Pi OS, but it's not putting the Raspberry Pi OS. It is writing the Cisco image to the disk. Now, this is the error that throws most people. Unable to write config file chestnut.txt, right? To fix this problem, you're going to click OK. And then you're going to click right down here where it says Update Config Only. We're going to click Update Config Only, and it should come back and say that the device is provisioned and added to your list of devices. And you click OK. Problem solved. right? Much better than going through the whole process 3 or 4 times. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean that it was provisioned, that it's available? I'm going to click on available devices over here, and we should see, here's the one that I just created, right? KAB-SPR-22 IoT, okay? It's showing currently offline, right? And the reason it's offline is because it's still in my computer, and I haven't touched it from that point. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to bring my, here's my Raspberry Pi that I've got plugged into my router here. I'm going to take the SD card that I just burned, and I'm going to stick it into the back of my Raspberry Pi. Okay, so it's going to go here. All right. And then I'm going to, once it's in, right, and I've got Ethernet plugged in, I'm going to plug the power in. So you see with the green there that it's starting to boot. I'm going to leave this picture here. I'm going to move this over here so we can see a little bit better. Here's that little Microsoft warning that I told you about. As soon as you put a Linux operating system on a machine, Microsoft freaks out and wants you to reformat, right? Just cancel out of those. Don't worry about it. It's not a problem. It's not part of what we're trying to do here. So I'm letting this thing boot. I'm not, you can see there's no monitor. I'm not looking at anything. Okay. And what I'm hoping to see here is, it usually takes anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes for this to boot, but this is the one we just set up. Where did we set it up? This one right here. Okay. So I'm going to leave my mouse on this line, but what we should see at some point is right here, an IP address should pop. It should show up on the screen, and then this thing will go to either checking or online and have a big green button. That's exactly right there. So that's exactly what we want. Okay. So if you did everything right and everything worked the way it was, and you're on the same network as your computer, after you boot this device, you can see I'm not looking at anything. I don't have any video connected to this. I just have Ethernet and power. Now you see that I have a connect button on my available devices, and it's showing me what the IP address is. Okay, I'm going to click connect. And I'm going to bring the browser over that it launched, right? It brought the browser over, Jupyter Notebook. You can see when I highlight it there, it's the same IP address that's listed over here. Okay. And I'm going to type in the password that I set. Does anybody remember what I set it as? The default normally, right? And when I hit enter, I get an agree here for a contract, but this is the interface from my computer to my Raspberry Pi. So this right here, this web page is running on this Raspberry Pi and is being provided to me through a browser. Okay. Now, these are interactive, most of these are interactive labs. Okay. The very first lab that you're going to do, which is the next assignment, you're going to create a create a notebook and things like that. But just to kind of show you what we're talking about, I'm going to click on writing a simple Python script. I'm going to click on the notebook. Okay, again, I am on a web page that's running on the Raspberry Pi. So this Raspberry Pi over here is feeding me these pages, right? And these instructions are, this is the instruction. They're going to show you what you're going to do, kind of how you're connected. We're going to use the PL app to access the Raspberry Pi. We're going to create a Python application and a simple game. Okay. I'm going to scroll down, and it's going to talk to you here, right? So writing simple scripts in a notebook. Okay. Enter the following sample code into the cell below. This code assigns numerical values of X and Y. Okay. So what they're talking about, they give you the code right here, and they want you to type it in down here. So X equals 1. Okay. And Y equals 2. And if x is greater than y. So I think you guys probably remember doing something like this a couple of chapters ago in our Python. And so if x is greater than y, then we're going to print that x is bigger than y, right? Why did it give me curly brackets? Did I do that? I must have done that. All right. And then else, right? So if that's not the case, if x isn't greater than y, then I want you to print y is greater than, y is bigger than x. All right. Simple enough. And then to execute this code, I just simply hit the play button right here. Hit play. Y is bigger than x, right? So in this case, we assigned x and y. 1 is not greater than 2, so this doesn't apply. The else applies. If I change this around and I said, well, let's make this makes x equal to 4, and I run it again, and you'll see x is bigger than y. Okay, so just to kind of real quickly do an introduction on how this works. These labs are interactive. They are only interactive if you're running them on the Raspberry Pi, right, through the PL app, right? So connected to the PL app. Okay, so there's two ways to connect to this device, right? I can hit the connect like I did, and that gives me, right, that gives me connected to the PL app here. The other thing I can do, you see how we now have an IP address here? If I just, I'm going to close this one. If I go to a browser and I type in 172.1769.224, right, it should, right, bring me right back to where I was on my web page. Okay, because PL app is a Jupyter Notebook. Jupyter Notebooks is a web-based interface for programming in Python and all kinds of other things. We're going to use it for Python. All right, that is the lab. So if you have a picture of this, a screenshot of this that shows your computer in the corner here, then you have satisfied the requirement for this assignment. Okay, this assignment is not here. Here's the D2L, right? So you would come back to the assignment, you'd click on the header, you would submit the screenshot, this screenshot that shows me you connected, and that's it. That's all you have to do to get connected. Okay, now the next assignment, which we're not going to cover in this video, the next assignment is going to have you go through, and I think if you look here, this one is not an interactive notebook, but what it is it does go through and kind of introduce you to how this PL app works, right? So you're just going to follow through and read about how the PL app works, connect to the PL app, create, right? You're going to do a little bit of block programming to show this nice little line chart. You're going to create your own folder, and I think you're going to submit this first folder, right? You're going to save it as like my notebook, and then that's the item that you're going to submit for that second assignment. So this 3224 assignment, I'm looking for you to play with PL app and create your own notebook, right? My first notebook, and you're going to submit this file. Okay, and that's the stuff that we needed. That's the stuff that we didn't get done for my 102 class. That's the stuff that we didn't get done when we had the power outage the first time, right? That was the next step in the puzzle, is to get this up and running and then to play with the notebook. I hope that this video is right about 30 minutes long at this point. This is really good. That's about how long it takes. If you follow along the process, right, then you should be able to get this done pretty quickly. I did it on a fresh new card on a Raspberry Pi. I didn't pre-script it or do anything like that. So if you have any questions, right, obviously reach out, Microsoft Teams. But hoping that walking you through it, you can see that it's over difficult. Most of the questions come when people try to mess with the Wi-Fi stuff. Okay, and I've already kind of highlighted it's got to match the name exactly. So uppercase, lowercase. I've seen that cause all kinds of problems. The simplest way to do this is to avoid. Just make sure if you can connect it with a wire. Most of 90% of our connectivity problems go away when we connect to a wire. Okay. With that, I'm going to end the video and get this thing up and attached to the assignments.